extractive industries, which was drafted by the Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry of Ukraine, along with the DiXi Group with its assistance. We will hear about the best practices on transparent reporting, and I am giving the floor to Olena Pavlenko, President of DiXi Group. Thank you to everyone who came to our today's briefing. I would like to talk about the previous year in the extractive sector of Ukraine. The main problem and main debates last year were the conflict between the extractive companies on the one hand and the government on the other hand. From the government, there was mistrust in extractive companies and shown that the profits are too high which are earned by those companies, but those companies try to confirm that they do not have any over profits, and they also said that they are under pressure of the government, and thus their output, their production output would fall, which happened last year. This means that the people of Ukraine lose in this struggle. The trust should be developed and the truth should be told. If once there is no adequate information, the truth can't be provided. So transparent information should be provided, and the dialogue should be elaborated between the civil society, extractive industries, and the government. And the Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry of Ukraine, along with the DiXi Group, for the second year in succession, have been conducting initiatives on transparent information provision in the oil and gas sector and other extractive industries. So with the support of DiXi Group, the Ministry of Energy published EITI report last year. It was the first report according to the standard, but if we are talking about the European integration of Ukraine, about working with foreign investors, the EITI report as published is not sufficient. We should provide more details about the payments made by the companies, how they work on site, how much mineral reserves they produce. That is why the initiative started to draft the new law, which will correspond to European and US rules of reporting in the extractive sector. The multi-stakeholder group was formed, which contained representatives from the Ministry of Energy, DiXi Group, and other stakeholders. The draft law requires that information is disclosed not only in oil and gas industry, but also in other extractive industries such as ore extraction. And as you can see in this draft law, some fines are supposed. So this practice is in place in Europe, but there are debates whether it is negative or positive feature. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Olena. I'm giving the floor to Oleksiy Orlovskyi, Director of International Renaissance Foundation Program, Democratic practice. First of all, I would like to say a few words about the extractive industry transparency initiative. It is important for those who hear us online today, listen to us online. Ukraine, after many efforts that have been made for several years, it has exceeded the extractive industry transparency initiative, which suppose disclosure of information by economic entities which extract minerals on the territory of a country, which make some payments into budgets and which conduct social projects within special areas where they operate. And in some countries there were problems related to whether the country indeed receives the payments to budgets which the company report about. That is why special audits were used in some countries when the government says that they have received one amount, while the company is saying that they have paid the other amount of taxes. So there are subjects of initiatives such as well-known auditors who reach their opinions, and at the end of last year the report was published on EITI standard, and as Olena have said already, this report was elaborated with some difficulties. The companies failed last year to report in detail so that such examination of information and its verification can be conducted. Last year, when the report EITI report was elaborated, this document should ensure the implementation of international reporting standards in the extractive sector, accounting reporting, so that the companies can't evade disclosure of information which is of public interest. You know that the subsoil is in the ownership of the people of Ukraine, so all of us should have enough information to get to know how the subsoil is used. So the report and the draft law they correspond to anti-corruption strategy of Ukraine, and they also implement the EU directives and are related to implementation of coalition agreement and the action plans on implementing EITI standard and implementation of action plan of open government partnership. So the substantiation and reasons for the Ministry of Energy to deal with this issue and for the civil society to deal with it are relevant. This means that this draft law will provide serious grounds for our companies so that they timely and in full scope provide information in future to an independent administrator for verification. We are asking our government and the ministry to work fast on this matter, and after that we will ask the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine when it is submitted there, so that this draft law pass all the procedures in time, and by May this year we will have this law adopted, because the second report should be published this year. And when elaborating the second EITI report, we should have more detailed information than we had last year. That is why we ask our government to implement these initiatives very fast. Thank you. I hope that Olena Diachenko will give us an overview of the activities of the Ministry of Energy in this aspect. Thank you very much. I support all the initiatives which our community and international institutions have been implementing in Ukraine. We are in the process of reforms. We disclose information in various sectors, and one of the interesting sectors is extractive industries in Ukraine. We are thankful to Renaissance Foundation and the World Bank and DiXi Group, which helped us to elaborate the first EITI report. If you have read the report on 2013 published last year, the country made an application in 2008 on transparency initiative. Last year we published the first report, and understanding the difficulties which we faced with receiving the information, with the time of its receiving, with the verification of information, with central executive authorities operations, with receiving information from business entities. Not all business entities are ready to disclose information. That is why, thanks to the assistance of Renaissance Foundation, we have drafted this bill, this draft law, which includes the main provisions. The international standard includes minimal requirements, and they are included in this draft law. If you read this draft law, you will see that we do not complicate accounting and financial reporting and day-to-day management reporting. Executive authorities will provide, this law will provide the opportunity for executive authorities to give this, to receive and give this information easier. So the companies should disclose this information at their website, so that the people, the civil society, can see all information, how much minerals have been extracted during certain period, and you can see that the fines are included. But this is a disputable questions. How can we talk about transparency on the one hand and fines on the other hand? However, some companies asking us what will happen if we will not provide you information. We told them that nothing, no punishment will follow. That is why they have not provided information. This was the reason why we included the fines into this draft law. We also address other executive authorities. We have the meeting with the Ministry of Finance. We address the issue of financial information which is required to be supplied by executive authorities. We should receive the information on financial aspects from the ministry and other agencies in a fast manner. And we also would like to see how civil society will work in these matters. We have been holding roundtable discussions. You know that we have made associations and cooperations with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other institutions. So we were working also on the matter of transparent taxes, which are applied by the government. So this law will be the foundation simplifying and making more transparent the taxation in this sector. There are many payments and taxes which companies should pay to budget, but maybe not so many taxes should be paid. The system should be simpler, and the ministry is ready to address all the matters and to work with the civil society. We will be very glad to see proposals from businesses, from civil society, which concern transparency of extractive industries. I have a short question. Is when this draft law will be considered, and when this draft law is passed, in your opinion? This draft law has been initiated by the Ministry of Energy, and it should pass the procedure of reconciliation with all other central executive agencies of the country, and after that it will be submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers, and once it is approved by the Cabinet, it will be submitted to the Verkhovna Rada, to the Parliament. So we have received only one approval from one agency. We had a meeting with Ms. Makeeva, and we are going to work hard during next several weeks to get disclosure of information which was problematic. We will be working with the Ministry of Justice during several next weeks, and this is the will of all ministries to fast provide their approval. Thank you very much. And now I'm giving the floor to Mr. Roman Nitsovych, DiXi Group Program Manager. Maybe he will give us some more details on the draft law. I would like to focus more on international standards and rules, which we would like to transpose in Ukraine. We as a civil society will make every effort to accelerate the process, and we will conduct the dialogue with all parties, including MPs, talking about the document itself, the draft law. I would like to emphasize that we would like Ukraine to become a component of worldwide trend in very detailed information provided by extractive companies. We are talking not only about big data concept, but also about the process which has been in place in the developed countries for 5 or 6 years. It started in the US when Dodd-Frank Act when detailed reporting was required with project breakdown by companies, all companies which are listed on exchanges were required to supply very detailed information on broken down by projects. There were many court sessions, many court proceedings concerning such disclosure of information. But last year, the court resulted with that the rules should be like that. All information should be transparent and very detailed. Not all oil companies were intended to provide detailed information. Both in US and in Ukraine, we should reach conclusions both from EITI reports and the protest which is on the way. The Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative and the Directive on Reporting were adopted in Europe. One of these directives is mandatory for Ukraine in the scope of association agreement. And we will facilitate Ukraine to meet these requirements of EU-Ukraine Association Agreement just in these aspects which concern extractive industries, and the draft law contains these rules, and Australia and Canada will exceed this process. This is a process which is relevant in the world, and Ukraine may become a part of this process, a component of it. It is important that reporting is disaggregated. Project-based reporting definition is to report on each license, on each document providing the right to extract minerals, oil and gas. In Ukraine, this is a special permit for subsoil use, which are required in such activities, as well as profit sharing agreements. US rules impose sanctions, very strict sanctions. European directives suppose such sanctions which are efficient, which would prevent evasion from disclosure of such information. And finally, I would like to say that we are providing we think it is very important that such information is disclosed. It is important for civil society to have information about the taxes, about social projects, about investments by business entities, about employment, including on the local level. One of the reasons underlying mistrust in this sector is the lack of information, and I hope that this legislation will help us to get more information. You can see here the brochure where all the rules are provided in Ukrainian. It is now available online in the internet resources. Thank you, Roman. I would like to ask the journalists also to add these links to this brochure with the rules of transparent playing in the extractive industry market. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I would like to say that last year, at the end of last year, the first Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative report was published, and it disclosed the problems which we face in the extractive industry sectors. A very sad figure is that the share of oil and gas production in GDP of Ukraine is less than 1%. In 1970s, this share in the Ukrainian SSR GDP was more than 20%, according to various estimates, including international institution estimates. Ukraine is on the fourth place in Europe, but its resources. We have reserves, but we also observe how the production has been falling, and this is a very bad trend which distracts our independence. The publication of this report revealed the main problems which we are facing in the extractive industry. They are tax problems and regulatory problems. As concerned regulations, we can see the Institute of Special Permits, which are granted in non-transparent manner, and they are not used for their purpose, for the extraction of natural resources. The ministry is drafting an other draft law so that special permits are issued by the Ministry of Energy, but not other agencies, which will make issuance of such permits more transparent. The businesses in this sector should operate fairly and transparently, and more companies, more market players should be involved, and this will encourage investments. No development of this sector is possible without investments. We are sure that this draft law is very important today, and we support it, and we will be supporting it, and form all the conditions necessary so that it is adopted as soon as possible. And we would like to thank our colleagues, our counterparts from Renaissance Foundation for their assistance. Thank you, Tetyana. I'm giving the floor to Andriy Oleniuk, partner in lawyers agency Everlegal. My team was involved in drafting this bill on technical assistance level. The first version of the draft law was elaborated, and also we were involved in the process of comments. I would like to say a few words. This draft law is rather novel. it is the first legislative initiative trying to regulate reporting of business entities in extractive industries on project-based breakdown level. Not only mother companies, but on the level of separate projects which are implemented by companies. For the first time, the definition of an economic entity operating in extractive industries is given. They are not only companies extracting minerals, they are also operators of transporting pipelines. This draft law is pro-European in its essence because it has been elaborated in compliance with the new European directives about reporting of companies on project-based level. And also it meets the requirements of EITI standard. And the third is that this draft law is open for discussions and debates. Talking about lawmaking, many definitions which we should transpose from EU legislation. They have been transposed into this version of the draft law, but some definitions, whether payments means only payments to budget and the definition of governmental body. Should it include the entities controlled by the government or not? And the definition of a project, whether it should include the activities on joint agreements, all of them provoked vivid debates. These definitions remain open for discussion, and we call on civil activists to join the discussion. We are an open working group on this draft law, and we will be thankful to you for your efforts and for your proposals. If we have no other comment, then I would like to give the time for questions. Journalists are welcome to ask questions now. Приходько Артур. I have a question. To Olena Pavlenko as top manager, what legislative initiatives you know beside this one which has been proposed today?
Let me start from the retrospective look. The law which I mentioned, it had been under development now. It is drafted based on the law passed in June last year, which allowed to compile first EATI reports. We believe that this new law will allow to develop new EATI report, which will strengthen transparency in the oil and gas production sector. As a civil society, we understand that to get support in the parliament, the law should be able to gain support from all the stakeholders, including the sector. And we also clearly understand that many companies won't be happy with extra work like drafting reports, compiling new stocks of data and information. That's why at the first stage, we try to convince that strengthening transparency of extraction industries is very beneficial for the companies. Now, in the parliament, there are the neighboring set of issues which are being discussed. For example, the allocation of land plots. Currently, it takes almost a year to get permit for the allocation of land plot for discovery works or I hope that I had answered to your question, that there are laws which should be passed. What do you think about the law 1640 about monitoring? From your smile, I understand that you are familiar with this law, this draft law, sorry. We analyzed this draft law some 3 years ago, I think. It has been in existence for almost 3 years. We believe that it should be amended, it should be improved, because I believe that we should have a single system accumulating all the data. And as of the moment, I do not remember what single body has to manage all those data. I think that instead of creating such one centralized body to request that all the companies, extracting companies, should publish their regular reports, and that's it, because creating or establishing one new more structure could make the system of the management and the sector more complicated. As far as I remember, back in 2014, in this very premises, there was the round table about energy security of Ukraine, and there were representatives of many institutions, and they did not express any wish to do this. And now the question: why do you think that the responsibilities and the scope of responsibility should be passed from the stage Nadra to the ministry? Is it a joke? Now, if you review the provisions, governmental regulations about the Nadra and the Ministry of Environment, you might see that they are responsible for environmental protection of subsoil resources, while the Ministry of Energy is responsible for production, for supply of energy resources to the country. How they are able to fulfill this responsibility unless they have no responsibility in production. Annually, we observe this steady decline in oil and gas production. Currently, we managed to shift to bigger supplies of gas from Europe, but nevertheless, this strengthens our vulnerability, and we believe that the a ministry which is responsible for providing fuel to the country. This very agency should have some access to and some influence on licensing. As far as I remember, that first when the geology agency was subordinated to the environment, this was a big shock for them. Decrease in production is probably not because of the sectoral problems. It's due to the war, to occupation of Crimea, to the loss of offshore gas resources. Maybe we should have an independent body. First of all, as for the Crimea and Donbass, I mentioned figures in contrast to the last year and before the last year, when we did not include figures from Donbass and Crimea. This second, I could mention that the biggest exploration system existed in the Soviet times, when on the account of state budget, a lot of geological surveys carried out, exploration works, etc. When Ukraine gained its independence, the principle of the access to subsoil resources had changed radically, and as of today, nobody, including the State Geoservice, has no possibility to carry out exploration works in any area without getting special permit. That's why all the responsibility for carrying out exploration works is now the responsibility purely of the companies or organizations which have to get state permit. There are no budget expenses provided for the exploration works and production works. That's why preferences given to State Gas Service to Dersh Gas Service are not understandable. Moreover, the Ministry of Environmental Resources and Geology Service decrease the number of permits for production and decrease number of permits for exploration. While this is not this should not be like this. If you have any questions, I'll give the microphone to you. I understand there is a very professional dialogue now. No further questions. Okay, so let's continue. Okay. In the law of EDSM, there was about the unified system of production, transportation of all the mineral resources, respectively, whether that were hydrocarbons or not. This does it mean that thus you aim to implement Article 13 of the Constitution? I think that the ministry should think carefully about this article. Of course, it's clear that we should remove any preferences in this area. Now we can see what's going on in the country now. The last time when we had the unified energy balance, this was 22 years ago. The system of measuring and application of multiple approaches results in the loss of 170 billion hryvnia, and I believe that any delays in introducing the requirement to compile this unified energy balance for each year should not be allowed. We should speed up this process. You might remember that even under Masol governance times, there was the request to the National Academy of Sciences to develop the approaches how to develop the unified energy balance of the country. Was it the question? How? Yes, it's a question. How you plan to do this? You have the program through 2017, and there are fines provided in this draft law. There is the law about information. In line with this law, I can get information anytime. That is, I can request information from any company. I have this right, even if the company do not wish to communicate with me. We will pass the laws like this about publishing reports, while the production companies will continue to rob the country. I do not understand you when you say that we have no access to the information. I think that the Ministry of Energy can explain in many detail how difficult it was to get the information in reality, despite the existent provision about general access to information. About your question, how we can merge together these two draft laws. I believe that we should start the discussions of this sort at the stage when both bills come to the parliament, because at the stage of passing through the parliament, all the bills become subject to a lot of changes, and this will be the stage when we should interfere, when we should offer our assistance, when we could merge together the draft laws and improve the text as much as possible. Now, about your question about getting information. Of course, we have the Constitution, we have legislation which protect the business and protect the state from disclosing information. Let's imagine that I'm a company, a foreign company, running business in Ukraine, and I have the right to reject to reject to disclose the information, referring that you request classified information. How much do I produce? How much do I pay in taxes? How much I spend on environmental protection, etc. And we found out that those companies, those international companies who got accustomed to run business the way that they should publish their information annually, they are more inclined to do this upon the request from the ministry. While our companies who even when they disclose some pieces of information to us during roundtable discussions, etc., but immediately they requested us not to show the detailed information about the company. That's why you will see just generalized information, how much was paid by all the companies as in tax payments, etc. The same is true with the tax authorities. The information which goes to statistics also is generalized. That is, you will see the general figure, how much did, for example, gas production companies paid to the budget, but not but without split into specific companies. The commercial secrets like the amounts of paid taxes to the state should be more known. And in order to be able to force company to do this, we need the laws which of this kind that we discussed today. Having discussions with enterprises actually here we are speaking about getting access to information, because verification of that information does not take, it does not make a big problem. There were some companies with whom we wasted 2 months trying to convince them to give information to us, and this all was in vain. Each company wishes to know the commercial secrets of the competitors, to know how much money the competitor spends on some specific objects, and sometimes companies are not very willing to deliver this information. Also, the companies are not very willing to disclose other types of information. Also, we are thinking about effective fines which would be able to stimulate companies in disclosing information. I would like to add the objective of this law is not just to get information. The objective is to create transparent conditions for the future via publication of the reports, EATI reports. We can observe the weak links. We can in the sector, we can observe what works inefficiently, and we can make decisions how to use this sector in order to increase generally GDP. This is like making a diagnosis, like measuring the temperature of a patient before appointing some, before prescribing some treatment. No input to the microphone. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak to the mic. So you will measure this temperature in some points, and what then? No. Well, balance is an economic category. We believe that this draft law sets proper reporting periods. May I? I'm Social Democrat from Social Democratic Party. I'm an archbishop and leader of the party. In case you do not approach to the social problems from Christian positions, you won't be able to reach any success. I would like to draw attention of everybody to the fact that 100 years ago, Ivan Franko had published an essay where he explained the origin of the problems of our times. 2 days ago, I pointed out attention of people to this essay and said that we pay no attention at the foundations. Having heard the answer of the Ministry of Energy, I understood that that I was correct when during Turchino presidency times stated that Yatsenyuk government was not professional. The government very professionally dropped the exchange rate. And now to the topic. If we wish to cook borscht for everybody, we should calculate how much borscht we need, and then we produce, for example, 10 liters. We first, so we cook 10 liters of borscht, and beginning with Kravchuk times, we produce more and more borscht, while all the rest of the population are sold the aroma of borscht. In result of this, a bigger part of population go abroad. The pensioners will die, and the Ukraine will become terra incognita with good government.
Подивились на геологію. В свій час я не зміг вступити в геологічний технікум, бо мені було всього 14 років. Так що ми з вами певною мірою родичі. Так от я думаю, що перше, треба знати по всім індикативам, скільки нам в країні потрібно енергії.
We should know how much energy do we need in the country, where to take this energy, how we would transport it, then under what conditions we will sell it, and then how much it will cost, and no element could not be reviewed separately. We have too much democracy when we cannot ask an oligarch who stays in Ukraine but represents the Martian company. all those companies, all those Western companies, they work here, but the money goes abroad. We agree that we should have transparency in production and do everything possible for exploration. This should be state program of the subsoil exploration. And the government ignores this. But the exploration should be carried out in line with the needs. For example, 2 days ago, I heard about a family who installed heating meters in their house and started to pay 240. People keep saying that there are too high tariffs. When
Скачали 650. От де проблема.
Можна відповісти?
Моє запитання, чи ми будемо розглядати проблеми в комплексі?
So now my question, whether we are going to look at the energy security of the country as a whole, comprehensively, systemically, or we will just take some aspects and in order to dissolve the issue, I will start and then my colleagues will add. You mentioned the list of issues which I believe the ministry can answer very specifically, and the experts can answer very specifically. You also, but you also mentioned that we need to have meters to understand how much energy we need, and even we should have meters even on the drilling equipment. When you say that the country has no comprehensive assessments of the needs, of energy needs, there are many attempts to measure the needs, to measure how much we need in this situation of the absence of the meters, by the way. Even journalists try to carry out their investigations. On the other hand, what we try to do today, and we will be happy if we get your support and the support of other NGOs and political forces, we need to get even more information to make more exact predictions and more exact assessment. This should be very comprehensive work of the political parties in the parliament or beyond the parliament. There should be efficient work of journalists who explain that each new draft law in this direction brings us closer to our objective. The only thing that you should keep in mind, speaking about the market, speaking about deregulation, speaking about market prices for people, market prices on fuel and oil, while the Western experience shows that this is the only way to have fair prices. The only way to have fair prices is not to control, not to regulate, but the market, but to monitor, to supervise the market. And we are moving towards these objectives. The other problem is that not so many journalists try to understand new draft law and try to explain to people why do we wish to pass this law. this is the system which had been being preserved from Soviet times through all 25 years of independence. There are many good things already done. We know where to go. We are gradually going this way, and now.
I would like to answer to your question in the following way. You are absolutely right that we should address all these questions in an integrated manner. As concerned the meters from October 1st last year, the law on gas market has been in effect, and you know that it regulates the matter of issues as concerned the consumption. The consumption today, our government now develop the programs on energy efficiency and renewable energy, and to decrease the use of fossil fuels, but we are talking about quite another aspects today. The share of consumption should include more oil and gas extracted in our country, because it gives us more independence as concerns the national program. They are in these conditions do not work because they suppose budget funds. There are not enough funds for prospecting and exploration. The companies should have the opportunity to engage investments and to input money into prospecting and exploration, and the government should assess the consumption in real terms, in real figures. All information about development, about all deposits, information was closed, it was confidential, it was strictly confidential. It used to be strictly confidential in the past. In practice, now it is open. Should it be open? The question is, should it be confidential or transparent? As for me, I can't answer this question myself. I'm not enough professional, so I would like to ask you. Confidentiality of information bring closeness of the country. You remember the iron wall which encircled the Soviet Union. So there should be the procedure regulating disclosure of geological information concerning special deposits or areas of subsoil. This information will be sold for certain amounts of months. We have the law, and we have the balance of reserves, which is confidential information. But information about certain deposits, it could be open to some business entities so that they can estimate their risks, their revenues and expenditures, being potential investors. Some information is confidential, but information about certain sections, about certain deposits, it could be accessible and available for potential operators of in extracting industry, and the estimate by foreign experts and international experts, it concerns individual areas, individual deposits, but not all focused reserves which have been explored in the country. Thank you, Ms. Tetyana. Are there any questions about the draft law? Well, we have no questions, and I would like our panelists to finalize, to give their summary comments. Thank you very much to all the panelists and all the participants, to our audience. If we plan this draft law to have been adopted by May, we ask all stakeholders, especially business companies, to provide their comments upon reading the draft law, so that the version which will be submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers, it meets the interests of all stakeholders. We would like to use participatory approach, and we ask MPs, as soon as this draft law gets the profile committee in the Verkhovna Rada, it should be fast adopted there. Thank you. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to mention this discussion today has been very interesting, because the matter is very interesting and important, and all panelists understand the importance of the problems and how they should be addressed in the integral manner, in the comprehensive manner. The draft law is a component, a very important component, although it seems small one, because disclosure on information will help us to prevent oligarchs from closing information, from using the national reserves to their own individual benefits. I hope for support of civil society and political parties and civil institutions, and we hope for MPs and Cabinet of Ministers support. Thank you for the questions, and I would like to support our discussion as concerned that the solution should be comprehensive. You know, we should use participatory approach. It seems like building a house when many workers are involved, many workers of various professions, and we can come to our overall goal of energy transparency if we use joint efforts. We are waiting for your comments through our website. Just send us comments or call us by phone to give your comments. The Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry will be working with all central executive authorities to accelerate the process, and we will be thankful to you for your support when this draft law will be discussed in the Verkhovna Rada. As concerns the report which was published in 2015 and which covers 2013, the World Bank is intended to fund the reports for the latest periods, and we will incorporate the comments on the taxation basis and on the reporting period, so that reporting is submitted quarterly. We have an open website where companies and the people of Ukraine can see taxation and all other things.
I would like to add, getting information is not the objective per se. The issue is how do you use the information, the data and information which will be able to get due to the new legislation at later stages could be used for establishing more efficient and more transparent rules of the game in the natural resources market, and thus to get more benefits for people, for local communities in particular. Information is a source for development. We have a lot of problems, and you might recollect a good saying that if you wish to resolve the problem, go beyond the borders of the system in which you have this problem. And I believe that we should move towards the openness of information. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the draft law which we discussed today, this draft law is of huge civic importance. For the first time, public at large will be able to get information about real profits of the companies and the benefits which the state, the nation gets from the country, from the company. That is, how much do they pay as taxes, and that from this point of view, implementation of the provisions of this law is very important. The draft law is written for public to ensure that the public has sufficient information and is able to lobby for efficient use of those resources which are available in course of fuels production. I wish the EATI initiative team inspiration, and if you still have topics for discussion, you may continue in our lounge, while the next briefing will be at